Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me for another Stan McDonald moment. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he disappeared for a long time and now he's back like buses with Stan, and I'm very thrilled. Today we're going to do something rather special, but before we tell you what that is, let's bring Stan back on. Hello Stan, how are you?
Hello Richard, it's good to be here.
It's good to be here. Now today, this is one that I've kind of spoken about. Other people have talked about. We've had all sorts of these sovereign people, lawful, unlawful, and what have you. And they've all said to me, Richard, you're not a person. But today you're going to prove that the government do know that we are actually not persons, but we're living men and women, I suppose. And they recognise that, but they like to make us think that we are. Is that a fair synopsis of what we're doing?
More or less, yes. In fact, they know that we're not a person, and we're going to show that. But see, ignorance of the law is no excuse, see? And when they don't tell you and you assume, like when they ask for your driver's license for ID, it's not yours, it belongs to the government. Right. But they have all statutes so far that I've looked up, and this applies to not only the UK, but today's topic will be the UK. You guys can apply it everywhere else. You're going to find out that they already know the truth. But if you don't know the truth and they can hoodwink you, they will. And we're going to expose the truth. So today I would suggest everybody get out their pens, pencils, or crayons and start looking at the statutes. Because like I said earlier in one of our other talks, you have to read the statute for what it is.
Yes.
And so
yes, we've had people on the show who said, you know, you're a living man and all of this. And then they avoid all the statutes rather than sort of proving that the government do understand that we are not these persons, but they convince us that we are these persons, and so we register and pretend and turn up and give them the jurisdiction and all of that.
Right. Well, that crap ends today, buddy. That's the thing. That ends today because the thing is, if you look into law statutes, or whatever, there's a dictionary. It's called Black's Law Dictionary. And a lot of people go to Black's Law Dictionary and they try to argue it, that they're not the person and everything else. But see, that Black's Law Dictionary was written by somebody, right? William Black or whatever the guy was, name that wrote it. And it's a publisher. But we actually have the proof right in their own statute. So I'm going to use their statute against them. Right. Now there's no more need to say, I'm not the fiction, I'm not the capitalized name. We don't care. Because if their statutes are supposed to be the gospel and we're supposed to follow the statutes, then let's use the statute against them. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. And this is going to apply to a bunch of things. Not only what we cover today. I mean, I could be here for a couple hours. We're going to give you the overview. It's up to you to then take it to the next step. That's pretty much.
Yep. So pens and papers at the ready. There'll be a test at the end.
Yep, and if they won't give you sharp tools, use your kids' crayons.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so as ever, we've got a presentation, which I hope I've got in the correct order and is displaying right on the screen.
Yeah, so today what we're going to touch on just briefly is council tax, because I know that's everybody's favorite topic.
Oh, yeah.
And we're gonna deal with income tax. We're going to deal with vehicles, parking permits, and driving offenses. But this applies to everybody. So if we go to the next slide, Richard.
Yeah.
Okay, now if we go back to 1215, that was sort of the creation of the Constitution, if you will. Now, if we look at 1215, okay, it was the first document put into writing, and it comes right off the UK website, so you can't, they can't give you this malarkey that it doesn't exist. Okay? So this predates the creation of the UK system, because that was in 1688. And if you remember, we did a presentation on what's called I call it primary legislation, because you always got to go back to the basics, the start of everything, right?
Right.
And some people have a different interpretation of primary and secondary legislation. But for the explanation, that's what created the foundation of the current monarch and the current government. And so if you're not party to a contract or an agreement, right, which is the Magna Carta, let's just use that for reference, then you have no authority to change it. You're not privy to that contract or that agreement, you can't change it, right? Simple enough.
Yeah.
So we're going to disprove one of the myths that the government tries to perpetrate on the people, and we're actually going to do it at least twice. This is the first thing. So the 1215 Magna Carta, basically the person that signed that, okay, and I'm using that term loosely, turned around and they were forced into it. And that's a history lesson we don't need to get into. But the government can't say that it doesn't recognize the Magna Carta. There's a screen capture. Keep that if you want. Use it in your document. I don't care. So if we go to the next slide, we find out in 1688 there were several acts that were enlisted. The first act, if you look there on the list there, it says C1, C2, and so on and so forth. So it says the Act of Will and Mar, 1688. That was the creation of the government. And then within that time frame of 1688, there was the Bill of Rights, which gave the subjects, and you people that are the general population, you're the subjects of this. And then there was the coronation oath that said every successor to the crown had to swear an oath back to the crown. And then we got the Great Seal Act, which basically states that all the government official documents are supposed to have a seal, if you will. So that was the creation of our current government. So if you can see the 1688 year, the other one was 1215. So the Magna Carta still stands, right? Because they have no jurisdiction to change something that they weren't involved in. So when the government says it has total supremacy or whatever, and we'll get into that a little later, you're going to see that that's a fallacy, right? It's false. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to find out something here. Okay, the first act of Will and Mar, and I'm just giving you this because it shows you the creation of 1688. It's a legitimate act. And what it says is an act removing and preventing in question all disputes concerning the assembly and sitting of the present parliament and parliament. So what that did is what they did was they abolished all the old rules where the king had supreme authority and he could rule and tax and do what he wanted. So this was the creation of the current government. That's basically what that comes down to. So if we go to the next slide. Now we go to the Bill of Rights, okay? And then it says, we don't need to get into this, but it says where the Lord's spiritual, temporal, and commons. So this was creating the House of Commons, okay?
Yep.
And what this tells you is that the Lord's spiritual, well, that's obviously the church, right?
Yeah.
And temporal actually was there's three temporal things, which is actually the law, okay? That was the creation of the three things of law, if you want to call it that. And then, and then Commons was creating the House of Commons. So this was I'm just getting to the point, this was the creation of the current government.
Okay.
So now, if we go to the next slide, this is where it all gets important. This is, if you went down that other one part ways down, it says subjects' rights. Okay? Now, I'm going to make Richard read that because this is important. Yeah.
Okay, just bear with me because I'm going to have to blow it up on my. You didn't tell me this, so I should have guessed, of course.
Of course. This, yeah.
Right, here it is. I can make that a bit bigger for me. Right, so subjects' rights. And they do claim, demand, and insist upon all and singular the premises as their undoubted rights and liberties, and that no declarations, judgments, doings, or proceedings to the prejudice of the people in any of the
Nothing can be done to the prejudice of the people, guys. We've covered this in the primary legislation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that means the people are the actual supreme, because if they can't do anything prejudiced to the people, then we have a right to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, or we don't agree with it. So this government has its supremacy and all this garbage. That's junk, because the subjects' rights prevail.
Right. If only somebody could tell them that.
You can copy it out of the freaking statute. It's right there.
Yeah, yeah. If only they would abide by it. I suppose that's what I mean.
Well, we always state that you have to consent, right? You have to consent.
Yes.
Well, there's your proof. If you don't consent as a general public, and I don't mean one person, I mean if everybody says we're not doing this, this is against our rights, and it's against the people, it's prejudice to the people, go away.
Yeah.
That's
And
where we're
on,
going to take our stand, right?
right. Okay.
Okay. You thought you'd have to read the whole thing. I wasn't going to be that mean to you.
No, thanks. That's a relief.
So now, the next thing they did, the government, this was in 1707. This is a history lesson. We're coming
Mm,
forward to today. This Act of Union which united England and Scotland, were passed during the reign of Queen Anne, not Queen Mary. Okay, so this is some different person. Remember, I said they have to go to the successors, and they always
yes.
have to swear an allegiance. There's your proof. The Union of Scotland Act was in 1706. Okay, and it was passed by the Parliament of England. And then the Union Act was in 1707 for Scotland, right? So we got two different scenarios there. So it took a year to get the thing done. Okay, and then this formation did form Great Britain. So what I'm telling you today applies to both England and Scotland. In fact, it applies almost everywhere that there's a British Commonwealth, if you want to call it that.
Right.
Okay, so they're basically merging two different parliaments, and it shows you that they're still operating under the Queen, even though it's a different Queen.
Yeah.
Right?
Or King.
Queen Anne versus Queen Mary. Okay.
Yeah.
So next slide. Okay, now this is really important. Now this says Parliament's authority, right? And unfortunately, it's a little scrawny, but they say that they have basically supremacy, and I made this on the next slide so you can see it. So they can't get out of this either because it came right out of their website. Okay. Now, this is all important because the government figures it rules the people. Well, we're going to turn that bus around today. So if we go to the next slide, Richard, they're claiming three things, and if you need the link to look that up, there's the link applied on the bottom. It says parliamentary sovereignty is the principle of UK Constitution. Okay, the rest of it we're going to get into. I broke this thing down. So parliamentary sovereignty, what does that apply to, Richard? Based on our previous slide, it applies to anything that can't be done that's prejudiced to the people.
Well, I'm guessing it can't be done to us. It can be done to businesses or corporations.
Yeah, or persons. Watch this. Now, if we go to the next slide, Richard, we're gonna end that myth today.
Right.
Okay. Now it says it makes Parliament the supreme legal authority in the UK, which can create or end any law. That's malarkey, because it can't end the Magna Carta. They weren't part of it. They can't change it. So they just lied to you. That's perjury. In fact, it's on the public, so it's a conspiracy to commit fraud. Now, if it can create or make or cancel any law, can it cancel the subject's rights? No, because it wasn't part of that creation. That's the founding documents for the creation of your government.
So would their argument, and I've heard this, say, oh, but that's so archaic, all that old stuff, it's all old-fashioned and we don't do things that way anymore. Now, I've heard people say that, or have had that said to them, by just sweeping away old stuff as if it no longer applies because we're in this new modern world.
Well, if the creation of the government doesn't apply, then the government's fraudulent. But so rather than get into that, we're going to even axe that even further today. That's why I said you want to dig out your pencils, because today we're going to axe everything.
Okay, good.
Now, let's go to the next slide. All I did was go down a paragraph. Generally, the courts cannot override its legislation. So can the courts override the Bill of Rights? No, it's right there in black and white. Can they override the Magna Carta? No. Can they override the subject's rights? No. Thank you. And that's right off their own website. I'm going to use it against them. Okay? And no parliament can pass a law that future parliaments can't change. That's malarkey too, because they can't change the Magna Carta, they can't change the Bill of Rights, or the Great Seal Act, or anything else that's listed in there. And here's the problem. When the government applies, so-called applies, this is a loose term, and they apply to make a statute, and it's supposed to receive royal assent from, the crown. Well, first off, isn't the crown kind of dissolved now? But anyway, on top of that, if they apply for it, and let's say they get this bill passed through, whatever it is, right? Let's just call it the Bill of Rights for hypothetical terms. Now, if that got approved, okay, theoretically, because it never received royal assent, we already know that. Okay, if that's been approved, how do they have the authority to go back now and modify and modify and modify that act to make it different? Those revisions were never approved.
No, that's
And
true.
so those revisions are garbage, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and where did their thing receive royal assent? I've never seen it. I've never seen a signature. And if it's done to the detriment of the people or to the prejudice of the people, it's null and void anyway, because the founding principle of the whole bloody thing was nothing can be done to the prejudice of the people. So
Yes.
your government's now lying to you. Is that not clear?
Well, it's very clear that they're lying to us because that's all they can do.
That's right. So let's go on to the next slide, Richard. Now, Parliament can pass laws that future Parliament can't change. We just got rid of that.
Yeah.
Parliamentary sovereignty is the most important part of the UK Constitution. Well, I don't know if I entirely agree with this, but anyway, we'll carry on because we're going to axe all this garbage today anyway. This is the last day, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
the parliamentary sovereignty in the UK Constitution is an uncodified, means that the UK doesn't have a single written constitution. What? They just admitted they don't have a single written constitution. So what is the Constitution? It has to go back to the founding documents, i.e. the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, you know,
Yes. And also,
because they,
what is the UK itself? Because before we were talking about Britain.
yeah, well, the United Kingdom is Scotland and England and what we covered earlier, right?
Yes.
So anyway, it says uncodified means the UK doesn't have a single written constitution. So that means because they don't have a constitution, Canada doesn't have one either. Not technically. We went through that. Canada's not real. We did a presentation on that. So if
We did.
yeah, we did. So if that's the case, then we have to go back to the founding documents because we can say, okay, if you say this, then show us the Constitution, and there is none. So I have to pull everything in, and they admitted it.
Right.
Partly written and wholly uncodified. So the Magna Carta still stands. And if we went through the Magna Carta, I don't remember if we did a presentation on that or not. But anyway, we didn't? Okay. There's certain rights and stuff in the Magna Carta. But if you want to talk archaic, well, we'll leave the 1215 Magna Carta. And then they come out with another one after that. Okay. Which they didn't have the right to modify that either because they weren't part of the initial document. So now you got to check into which version of the Magna Carta you want to reference. But I use 1215 because that's what the government said, so I'll use theirs against them.
Mm.
So if we go to the next slide, we're going to start axing this thing. The developments affecting Parliament sovereignty. Over the years, Parliament has passed laws that limit the application of parliamentary sovereignty. Well, wait a minute. I thought you just finished telling me they had total supremacy and they could do what they wanted to. Well, now you're telling me this is out of their own website, that they passed certain laws that limit what they can do. So they admit now they don't have parliamentary sovereignty. Okay.
Okay.
And then this is right off their website. All I did was print it out and bring it so you could read it. Now, it says the devolution of power of bodies like the Scottish Parliament. Okay. The Human Rights Act, 1998. The UK entry into the European Union in 1973, and then they exited in 2020. The declaration to establish UK Supreme Court in 2009, which ended the House of Lords function within the UK's final court of appeal. Okay, but this isn't an extensive list. Don't think this. Remember when I think we did one on legal words one time. The inclusion of one thing is the exclusion of everything else. Normally that would be true. But in this case, it should say they include but are not limited to.
Right.
Because what they did here, if you just base it off of this, then you don't have anything other than what that is. Okay? So if you ever read a legal document, you'll often find it says includes but isn't limited to. For example, and I'll give you this in English language so it's not this legalese garbage. Okay? We're all going out to dinner and it includes chocolate cake for dessert. Okay, so you order your dinner and they'll give you a chocolate cake as part of the deal. Now, Richard comes along and says, well, I don't like chocolate cake, so I would like lemon pie. Now, they may accommodate you and they might say, we don't have lemon pie because it only included chocolate cake and that's what we made, so take it or leave it. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the word includes is not exclusive of everything. Right?
Yes.
Right? Richard and I are going to go on vacation. and we're gonna include, his neighbor and the guy across the road. Does that mean everybody on the street can come? No, those two people, because we authorized it.
Right.
Right? It includes. So that's just a key word. Like they play games with you with words.
Okay.
Okay. Now it says in here, the developments do not fundamentally undermine the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. Well, they've already said that it's limited.
Yeah, they
Right?
have.
So, yeah, Parliament could repeal any of the laws, not really, but anyway, they can't repeal the fundamental Bill of Rights. Otherwise, if they could appeal it and they said this is all we have to deal with, then they already admitted we don't have a constitution and it's not codified. So now the only thing we have to follow is this? No, clearly that's wrong. Right? So let's go to the next slide and we'll get rid of this. The Human Rights Act, 1998. Well, whatever happened to the Bill of Rights, 1688? First in time, right? First in line. That's a legal maxim. So because our stuff predates the 1998, then obviously our stuff still holds true. Otherwise, the creation of the crown, like when we got the king, he swore an oath to the crown, right?
Yeah.
Remember, then they had the Grim Reaper in the backyard, back. You can see it there. Okay, well, if that wasn't true, if what I'm saying wasn't true, that they have to go back to the principal founding documents, well, then why did he swear an oath to the crown? Because the 1688 laws can't be repealed, because that's the creation of your government. So that means those subjects' rights still stand today. So we are the supreme authority of the government. The government is not the supreme authority over us, because if it's done prejudice to the subjects' rights, and everybody that's I hate to use the term, a person in society is one of the subjects. I think that should be self-evident and clear by now.
Yeah.
So let's carry on, because we're going to really put Parliamentary Act 1911. This is where the government started to destroy persons' rights. Okay? Mm-hmm. This Parliamentary Act 1911, and there was one that subsequently followed it, what they were doing, and they talked here about the people's budget. It's about the fourth line down.
Oh, yes.
Okay? And what they were trying to do is say that if they wanted to push something through, they had to take time for the people to review the public bill, and they could basically say, we don't agree with this. Because for any law, or we'll call it a law, any statute to come into force, they have to actually publicly post it and give the people a chance to, agree with it, file an appeal against it, say we totally don't want it, whatever.
Yes.
But most of the time, this is actually published in the Gazette. Now in Canada, we have a provincial Gazette in Ontario and Alberta, Saskatchewan, and so on and so forth. And they have a federal one. Well, you guys have the same thing. Because if something isn't brought out to the public, and the public have no input, then it's not legally binding. Now, when I did research on our Highway Traffic Act for Ontario, the first one came out in 1928, and it was to regulate commerce on the highway. Okay,
to regulate what did you say?
Commerce on the highway.
Commerce,
because the word traffic. Okay, you heard of people drug trafficking? That's because it doesn't mean they're transporting drugs. It means they're actually selling drugs commercially to make a profit.
Right.
Okay. Well, so anyway, the Highway Traffic Act was to help people that they had to pay because they were using the road for commerce.
Yes.
Now they twisted it over the years, and now everybody has to get a driver's license.
Because we all think that we are part of the traffic, but we're not really part of it. If we're not selling anything, and we're privately going about in our conveyance like we used to do.
Right. And the word driver, if you look up in Black's Law 4th, it says one being employed. So if you're not being employed by somebody, why do you have to get a driver's license? And in fact, you're going to find out today that you don't. Now, if you go to the petrol station and buy your diesel or your gas, whatever, there is a road tax.
Yes.
Now, I might be slightly off on this, but I think in the UK it's around 76%, something like that you pay in road tax, and that's to pay for the infrastructure of the road. So therefore, if you're paying for the infrastructure or the use of the road, why can't you use the bloody thing?
Well, yeah. Why are there potholes?
Yeah, exactly. And as we know, and you've covered this on your show previously, that when we deal with council tax, part of that is supposed to pay for the infrastructure. Now, we both know, and we've already disclosed this, that what they do is they take all those funds and they put it in a consolidated fund and they siphon off what they deal with. In fact, we covered a little bit of that in our last program. So anyway, this is what they did. So they wanted to give people less time to appeal a notice that came into the government, and then they were trying to scrunch it down. And if we go to the next act or next slide, they did the same thing in 1949, and basically they tried to push it through so they could get things put through the government faster with less input from the so-called public, right?
Right.
That's what this comes down to. So I'm telling you, why would they have these acts unless what I stated earlier, where a person had time to say, hey, we don't agree with this as a general population, but they shortened it. And what they do now, a lot of times, is some yo-yo in the government will write up some big massive book and they have to get this thing pushed through so nobody has a chance to read it. Because if they did, people would say, what the heck, this isn't right. And they don't announce it to the public, so that means all the statutes and acts that were not properly put through the Gazette are of no force and effect because the people had no chance to appeal it or no chance to object to it.
Well, nobody knows. I mean, we had that last year with the modification of animals thing that came out. The king, suddenly it was just like given royal assent. And I think they put it on their website for about a week. So, they could say, well, it was on the website if you didn't see it. But who's checking the website every day to see if the government are doing some nefarious act to get the royal assent? Nobody.
Yeah, if they say they put it on their website, say, well, okay, where is it? Because you just capture the website. So, well, I don't see it. It wasn't there.
Yeah.
They want to play their little game. I'll play my little game. But we're going to find out today we got a bigger bomb in store. Okay. So we go to the next slide. We're going to see something. Okay. This is important, people. This is the part you're going to start writing stuff down. The Interpretations Act, 1978. So if you're reading an act, a lot of times when you read any act, and I don't care if you're in Canada, Australia, UK, who cares? There's definitions in that act.
Yes.
And those definitions tell you what things mean.
Right. Okay? Like its own dictionary.
Exactly. But if there is no dictionary because they didn't define a word, then we have to go to the Interpretations Act, and this is the saving grace, people. Okay? And so what this does is it defines if there's a word in an act or a statute somewhere, and you don't know what it means, you can go try to look it up, but the ultimate supreme authority is this Interpretations Act.
Right.
Okay? Remember that if you remember nothing else.
Okay, now, the Interpretations Act of 1978.
Yeah. So just remember that. So now we've got to go through the act and see what we can figure out. And the act actually isn't that big. But anyway, if we go to the next slide, look at this. Oh, look at this. This section applies the act refers to the powers and duty on a person to make legislation. And then look under B, the duties are accessible under person, which the voter term is person. Holy crap. Everything they do relates to a person. Did you see that? Every statute you read applies to a person.
Yes.
That's what we want to get across. That's why it's highlighted. So let's go to the next slide, Richard, because we're going to end this garbage today. Now, Interpretation Act includes local and personal or private acts. So it applies to everything. They're telling you right there that it applies to personal and private acts. And what are these statutes? And then it says it's subordinate legislation. It means orders in council. Oh.
So just hang on, just slow down so I can completely get this. It says in this act it includes local and personal or private act.
Yep.
What do they mean by that? A private act? I mean, we're private people, aren't we?
Right, but when the legislature or the government puts through an act, that's all private law or a private act. They don't tell you that, but it is. Were you party to it? when they passed the Highway Traffic Act or whatever it's called, Traffic
Oh, I
Management
see what
Act,
you're saying. So, yes, so it's a private act that they're privy to. None of us are privy to it because
right? So
we
that's
weren't
right.
there.
That's right. So they are admitting that what I'm telling you in this Interpretations Act applies to that. It means orders in council. And what is the Crown, the Queen's Council and all that? Orders and regulations, schemes, warrants, bylaws, and other instruments. Well, every statute is an instrument. It's an instrument of the statute, instrument of law, or
Right.
made under any act. Okay, to be made under any act. It says on the second line.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, and I've now proven that this interpretation sucker is applicable to every law, every statute, everything they ever do. Okay, and you see these F11s, F14s. This is where they made amendments to this Interpretations Act. That's why it's got those funny looking blue, and
Oh,
it'll tell
okay.
you when it was done. But we don't care. Okay,
Right.
now if we keep on going, compliance day. Okay, I got to just read this pretty quick. Made debate this day under assessment direct. Yeah. Okay. Okay. A direct. Okay. It doesn't
Oh,
matter.
sorry. No, no, I'm
Anyway,
there.
it says here, direct payments to farmers, legislative and county act. So they're telling you right there it applies to that thing. For some reason, it didn't apply. Okay. Now, the important sucker here, 31. What does number 2 say? The act binds the crown. So they can't get out of it. It binds the crown. So now we've got them stuck to this Interpretations Act. So let's use it against them.
Right.
Okay, no. The provisions of this act apply to instruments made under an act of Parliament. Well, isn't that pretty clear?
The provisions of this act apply as an instrument made under the Act of Parliament.
Yeah, because they made this thing. What is this? It's the Interpretations Act. So they're admitting that acts are instruments.
Right.
Thank you. Lovely. So every act is an instrument. And it also said previously that it binds the crown. So they can't get out of this thing.
Okay. And what does it
Okay?
mean by an instrument? I mean, obviously not a musical instrument, but it's
No, because it's paperwork. It basically creates something that's legally binding. When you
right.
sign a mortgage contract or a loan contract, that becomes an instrument.
Yes,
It's a
that's legally
financial
binding.
instrument. It's a
Right.
financial instrument. This is a legal instrument. Now, the instrument, okay, is made at any time, okay, at any time with any other person. Oh, okay. So again, it applies to the person. Lovely. Okay, and
Yeah.
it's not Division Wealth Authority because they got their own in the wealth. They got their own authority. They got their own laws. The instrument contains any provision that applies otherwise in relation to Wales. So they got slightly different system. All right, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Now let's go to the next part of this thing. Oh, look at this. Governor General includes any person. Okay, because they're talking in commercial terms. Who, for
Yeah.
the time being, provides the government general and the governor. That'll disappear in a minute, unfortunately. But fortunately. Okay. Okay, so it says the powers of the governor general.
Yes.
Okay. And in relation to the British
Possession
possession, includes an officer for the time being. Okay, administering the government
of
of the
that
possession.
possession.
Yeah, in 1889. So you're going to tell me something from, previous doesn't apply? Well, it says right here it does. Okay, now it applies to Her Majesty Revenue and Customs. Okay. Given the Section 4 and Commissioners in Revenue and Customs Act 2005. Now, there's a key thing. Person includes, so remember it's restrictive,
Yeah.
a body of persons, corporate or unincorporated. So if you have a body of persons, doesn't that mean more than one?
Yes.
Persons is plural.
And so
says
that
body,
includes is excluding everything else other than what we're now saying. Is that correct?
exactly, 100%. And
So
look at
it
the date of this
includes
sucker,
yeah.
1889.
Right. So this is the big thing, isn't it? This is the
Yeah.
big bit.
So
So
it
ordinary,
proves,
everyday, singular people, one, man or women sitting around waiting for a bus stop, they're not in this.
no,
It's this body of persons, corporate or unincorporate.
right. And I didn't put it in here, but if you look up the word includes just in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and
Yeah.
it says the inclusion of one thing is the exclusion of everything else, and it contains within the whole. So that's when I went back to that we're having, roast and chocolate cake for dessert.
Yeah.
It includes chocolate cake. It doesn't include raspberry pie, peanut butter cookies.
Yeah.
So it includes only the things it says, and it says includes the body of persons corporate. There's no comma in there. So
No.
now they're telling you that the freaking person is a corporation.
Right. What does
So
it
you
mean?
don't have to argue it anymore. It's right here in
No.
your Interpretations Act.
Yes. So as individuals, we are not persons corporate,
Exactly.
or persons unincorporate.
You got it. Because we're not persons. We're not plural.
We're not plural.
That's
Although
right.
some people like to be known as they and them, and so they may be cool. But anyway, let's
Well,
not
if
get
they
into
want
that.
to give up their rights, let them do it. I don't care.
No, exactly. They might think twice.
Right.
That's really interesting.
Now, the definition of person, so far as it includes body corporate, applies to any provision of any act. Oh,
Right.
good. You just admitted that this person thing now applies to all your statutes.
Yes.
Okay, and then it says whether passed relating to an offense punishable on indictment or on summary conviction.
Yes. Doesn't apply to you and me, though.
Thank you. Next slide.
Next slide coming.
Yeah. Now lovely, lovely. Look what we have here. Taxes Management Act. Hi, people. Can you guys all say federal income tax? Remember that the person thing applies to every act. We just proved it.
Yes. Every act.
Okay, so I'm just showing you where I'm getting this information. You guys can go look it up. I mean, you guys know how to use Google, right? An act consolidates certain enactments relating to income tax, capital gains tax, and corporate tax, including certain enactments related also to other taxes. So basically, we're going to deal with taxes now. Federal taxes, HMRC.
Yes.
Okay, next slide.
Next slide coming.
Yeah, watch this. Oh, lovely, lovely. Notice the liability, income, and capital gains tax. Every person. Okay, we're done. Now, person is in this document 640 times, it says on the bottom.
Yes.
It doesn't say individual, I don't think. You guys can do your own research. And I did a search for the word person. So what is a person, Richard? We already uncovered that part.
A person is this incorporated plural thing.
Right. So use their act against them. So now, let's go to the next slide, Richard.
Okay.
I had great fun doing this.
Oh, good.
Now, oh, looky. There's a law here to deal with Public Bodies Corporate Practices Act. And guess what? Read the bloody thing. I'm not asking you to do this, but I'm telling you guys, read the bloody thing.
Right.
Because this thing tells you what you can do against the government when it commits treason. When it does something illegal. I don't know, like how about council tax, for example?
Yes. Or sending money overseas to kill people.
Which is a violation of the UN Charter, which means you cannot legally, because the UK and Canada and Australia and a bunch of these outfits are part of the UN. So you can't lawfully pay taxes to a corporation, right, that's engaged in unlawful activities such as war. It's against the UN Charter. We covered this on a program about a year ago.
We did, yeah.
We did. And now we know that those persons aren't really us, are they?
No.
Now, if I had somebody that was engaged in a council tax issue, you could bring this forward, and how are they going to argue it? You don't worry about the capitalized name and, well, it's all in uppercase, lower. I don't care, because this is your statute, and if your statute applies in one area, then some other statute, i.e. the Interpretations Act, will apply in every area because it says so right in your own document. So if one document's good to hang me, then the other document's good to hang you. All are equal under the law. No one's above the law. Now, this thing goes through and it explains what can be done against these, corporate scumbags, if you want to call them that.
Well, you just did.
Yeah, I just did. Because I had enough of this. When I was doing this, I was like, good, now we're going to do something to benefit to the people. Because everybody says, well, I'm not the capitalized name. The name's in reverse. All this crap. I don't care about that. If your statute under the Highway Traffic Act or Traffic Management Act, as you call it, whatever, applies to me, then this Interpretations Act also applies. And they can't get out of it. Their feet are screwed to the floor. They can't move.
Yeah.
It's your act, for crying out loud. All I did was read it and apply it.
Yes.
And I'm not a persons, I'm not plural, and I'm not a body corporate. Right?
And they can't go back
right
and just change it. They can't just go back and we'll take the S off there so nobody notices.
No, it can't.
No.
No, that act is in Parliament, and they weren't part of the ones that created it. And that was back in the 70s. Do you think anybody that worked in the government is still working for the government today?
No.
No. Okay, let's carry on, Richard. But anyway, read this thing, guys, if you want to go after your so-called government.
Yeah.
Next slide. Okay. Now, oh, look. Penalties for offenses. Any person, conviction, okay? And then this thing goes through if you want to read all that. If you don't bother. But anyway, it tells you right in there what you can do to these people, right? Public officer, 7 years for crime. Okay, go ahead and read it, because you might as well. Somebody can write this stuff down.
Okay. Any person on conviction for offending as aforesaid shall, at the discretion of the court before which he is convicted, A, be liable to be imprisoned for any period not exceeding 2 years, with or without hard labour. I'd like to see some hard labour going on. Or to pay a fine not exceeding £500, or to both such imprisonment and such fine. And B, in addition, to be liable to be ordered to pay to such body and in such manner as the court dictates, or directs even, the amount or value of any gift, loan, fee, or reward received by him or any part thereof. Ooh.
Right.
C.
If we stop there, Richard, for a sec, just for a sec. So when the council gives you a tax bill, right, part of their paycheck goes into this thing, so they receive part of it. So that applies to anybody trying to enforce their government garbage, because their paycheck is dependent on this. So they have to return that all back to you. So that means you can get all your taxes back now that you paid for this council tax, which you accidentally paid in error. Well, same with your HMRC.
Yes.
Right? Because it's right there in black and white. Now, carry on.
C. Be liable to be adjudged incapable of being elected or appointed to any public office for 7 years from the date of this conviction, and to forfeit any such office held by him at the time of his conviction. And,
so we can kick them out of their job. Good.
Which would be nice.
Yeah.
D. In the event of a second conviction for a like offence, he shall, in addition to the foregoing penalties, be liable to be adjudged to be forever incapable of holding any public office, and to be incapable for 7 years of being registered as an elector or voting at an election, either of members to serve in the Parliament or its members of any public body, and the enactments for preventing the voting and registration of persons declared by reason of corrupt practices to be incapable of voting shall apply to a person adjudged in pursuant of this section to be incapable of voting. And, finally, E, if such person is an officer or servant in the employ of any public body upon such conviction, he shall, at the discretion of the court, be liable to forfeit his right and claim to any compensation or pension to which he should otherwise have been entitled.
Now, I would think that would apply to the entire government, wouldn't it?
And it is interesting that all of that is, none of that seems to apply to any ordinary, everyday member of the public, or just man or woman going about their business. It's all about people in office, isn't it?
Right, because that dealt with public, right? So that tells you, because those guys are all public officials. The courts are public, the council people are public, that's a public building.
Yeah.
So now there's what they're liable for.
Right.
And they can't get out of it because it's right in their own laws. Right?
Yeah.
Use their laws against them.
So we could be writing to them and saying, by the way, you've all this malfeasance and what have you. You are liable. Here we go. Hand yourself in to the nearest police station, please.
And the thing is, if the court won't do something, we actually have the authority to generate and make our own court.
Right.
So when people go into court, a lot of times they say, well, they want a trial by jury or jury trial, right? And people get confused. So let's just recall this thing to something else. We want an independent jury. Just use that term. Because then they're independent of the government. There is no confusion. Simplify it down so even, a layman can understand it.
Yes.
So Now we've canceled HMRC, right?
Yeah.
We showed you what they can be done against them. So let's carry on because we're going to axe the rest of this today too. Okay. Now, what does this thing tell us?
This one says, where an offence under this Act is also punishable under another enactment or at common law, such offence may be prosecuted and punished either under this Act or under the other enactment, or at common law, but so that no person shall be punished twice for the same offence.
Right. So when you do your paperwork and draft it up, make sure you hit them with the most severe penalty.
Absolutely. Number 2, a person shall not be exempt from punishment under this Act by reason of the invalidity. I can't say it. Invalidity.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. Of the
Yep.
appointment or election of a person to public office.
Now, didn't the
Invalidated.
government tell us they had sovereignty? I'm
Yeah, they did.
sorry, but you don't have sovereignty. It's right in your own act. Oh.
Oh.
Number 4.
Number 4, this is restriction to prosecution. It says a prosecution for an offence under this Act shall not be instituted except by or with the consent of the Attorney General.
And how can the Attorney General go against his own statute that he wrote or he let go through?
Yeah, no, he couldn't.
Exactly. So now we got a way to hold these people accountable.
And the final bit here is, in this section, the expression Attorney General means the Attorney or Solicitor General for England, and as respects Scotland means the Lord Advocate, and as respects to Ireland means the Attorney or Solicitor General for Ireland.
Right. So this applies to those guys for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool beans.
Yeah. Next.
Okay.
Now.
This is quite small, but I can read that.
Yep.
Number 5, expenses of prosecution. The expenses of the prosecution of an offence against this Act shall be defrayed in like manner as in the case of a felony.
And what is felony? Felony is criminal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the last one here is jurisdiction of quarter sessions. A court of general or quarter sessions shall in England have jurisdiction to inquire of, hear, or determine an offence under this Act.
So now they can't claim they got sovereignty, can they? Because it says right there that the court has jurisdiction. Now, in the old days, they used to have what they call quarterly sessions, and they didn't have court every day. That was like 4 times a year.
Yes.
So we're going to apply the modern standard. So they can't say, well, we have sovereignty. We're the crown. No, sorry. This thing says otherwise. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and
they can't. That's it. They're done.
They're done. And we can point exactly to their rules, and they'll just have to squirm, won't they?
Right. About time. Now, interpretation. Right? Number 7.
Yes.
The expression of public body means any council. Oh, okay. So any council, let's say, that applied council tax, or county, okay, or county of a city or town, any council of a municipality, borough, also any board, commissioner, select city, or other body which has the power to act under for the purpose of any act relating to local government, like the local government finance act, or the public health. Oh, how about NHS when you screwed us up with a certain medical intervention?
Exactly.
Or for law, otherwise administered money raised by rate in pursuance of Public General Act. Well, that would be your income tax. But does not include any public body as above is defined and existing everywhere than the United Kingdom. So they're saying this applies to the United Kingdom, which it does, and the other ones that are connected with it. The expression of public office means an office or employment of a person as a matter of officer or servant of such public body. Okay, the expression of person includes a person of persons, corporate or unincorporated. Because when you talk to somebody down at the government, whatever, wherever you're going, they are part of that body corporate. That's their position, right? Loan officer, court clerk. So you can get all of these people. The expression advantage includes any officer or
dignitary.
delegate, dignitary, Okay, for forbearance or demand any money or money's worth a valuable thing. So anybody that's demanding money from you that's in the public office, and it includes any aid, vote, consent, or influence, or pretense, aid, vote, consent, or influence, and also includes. See, they have to add stuff. Also
Yeah.
includes any premise
Promise,
or
promise or procurement of or agreement or endeavour to procure, or the holding of any expectation of any gift, loan, fee, reward, or advantage as before defined.
right. And what are they all asking for? They want some
Well,
kind of a gift fee.
yeah,
Well, anybody's charging you a fee. Well, there you go.
yeah. I think,
Okay,
I mean,
next.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
all there.
what? Why would they write this if you know, why would they put it there? That's what I don't understand, because it's sort of damaging them.
Right. So now we're going to show the Local Government Finance Act. That's just a screen to show you where it came from.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's
Now we
move
go to the
on.
next slide. Now in here, that one's a
That is
little harder
very,
to read.
yeah, I can't read that.
But anyway, on the number 2, it says any person, I think. A
Yeah, number
person,
two,
yeah, it does.
a person
Yeah,
falls within this subsection in
that's all we
relation.
want, a
Yeah.
person. So the Local
Okay.
Government Finance Act applies to a person, and we all know that's not us. So now we've
Yeah.
canceled the Local Government Finance Act. Let's go. There we go. I blew it up for you because I was
Oh
just to
yeah.
show you where I got it from. It says a person falls within subsection. So it applies to the person. It doesn't apply to you.
Yeah.
Next. Road Traffic Act.
Yeah.
So what did people do prior to 1988 if you guys didn't have a Road Traffic Act prior to 1988?
Well, I mean, I was driving on a road in prior to 1988. In fact, 10 years before that.
Yeah. Statute provides the legal framework for various aspects of road traffic, including vehicle registration, licensing, driving offenses, road safety, and traffic management. Additionally, there are numerous regulations and amenities to complement these acts, further specify rules. Okay,
Yeah.
good enough. Let's go under the Road Traffic Act. Oh, look, what does it say where I circled it in red?
Oh, it says it is an offence for a person to drive on a road in a
Right. So
motor vehicle.
what's a
Well,
person?
yeah, well, it's not us.
Right, and driver, look in Black's Law 4th, is one
Oh, yeah.
being employed. So if you're using a private conveyance, or I call it a time machine, because if you walk a certain distance and I use my vehicle, I'm going to get there faster. So it's a time machine. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's an offense for a person. So again, the Traffic Act, I'm showing you now that the Traffic Act applies to the person,
Yeah.
right? That's all we're getting at. Oh, look at
Okay.
this. Now we're under the Traffic Management Act. And so if you need a permit, like a parking permit, that applies to the person,
Oh, yes. There it is in
right?
green.
Yeah.
At no
Yep.
point does it say it applies to anybody else.
Applies to the person. And we now know what persons are, don't we? Oh, look at this. Traffic Management Act. Road directs a person driving or propelling a vehicle. So now it definitely covers people that are driving, but you're not
Yes.
driving, right? You're not commercial.
You're not commercial and you're not a person. So
Exactly.
it's talking about a completely different bunch of people, but it's not us.
That's right. That's right. Now, let's go to the next slide. Now, I'm working on a book regarding council tax, and if you wish to be informed when it's complete, you can send an email to that, or you can ask questions. Now, sometimes Richard gets questions asked to him, and he goes, I don't know what to do with it. So he forwards it to me, and I personally don't mind, because we're all in this rat race together, and we're trying to resolve the issue of the government tyranny that's being put upon us. Now, it's hoped with today's presentation that you look at the other statutes that apply, right? Or do they? And find out if they do apply to you. And you're going to find out the statutes are all written towards persons. And I did
And
that in Canada too. There's over 8,000 statutes within the UK. I can't go through each one. But what we've done is open the doors so now you can see what's happening. And it's up to you guys to do your due diligence and look into it. Right?
so some people who might be sort of new to this will say, but are we not persons because we're, that's just a catch-all term for all of us?
That's what they want you to believe, yes. But now you can use their own legislation against them. And that's why I showed you that, because when I was doing it, you asked me which presentation. This one
Yeah.
fixes everything, right? It fixes everything. You guys can Google that stuff, and I would suggest you download those statutes before they go modify them. Because
Yes.
what we just did today, we got rid of the council tax, we got rid of HMRC, we got rid of traffic, right?
The
And it
question,
says
I
you can hold
suppose,
them accountable too.
yes. The question is, I suppose, if you go there and say, well, I'm not, thank you very much, I'm not paying this, by the way, because it doesn't actually apply to me. And they come back and they say, well, it does. We take you to court, you go to a bulk court and all this sort of nonsense. And then the next thing you know, you've got these thugs coming at the door going, give us the sodding money. And you say, no, bog off, it doesn't apply to me because I am not a person. How do you, I mean, you've got to get these people to rationally go, oh, yeah, sorry, mate, you found the little loophole there. How do
Yeah.
how do we get them to recognise that actually we've pulled the rug from underneath their feet, and that we've gone, we see what you did there, but we haven't fallen for it?
Basically non-compliance. What you do if you end up with a problem, let's just pick on council tax because it's everybody's favorite topic,
Yeah,
right?
especially at the
You,
moment.
especially at the moment, you can write a letter to them and say, well, under the definition, your income tax or council tax or HMRC applies to the person, and person is legally defined under the Interpretations Act under, body corporate.
And
Okay,
that's not
incorporate,
me.
unincorporated, and that's not me. So when you go into court, the first thing they have to determine in a court is subject matter jurisdiction. Does the court have the right to hear this case? Yes or no, right? So if you go to council tax, just as an example, they pull you into a magistrate's court. Well, why aren't you in high court? Or I don't know, why aren't you in the Court of Ontario Court or Superior Court in Queen's Bench? Because it lacks jurisdiction. So if you challenge jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, they have no right to hear this case because it's not applicable to you, because you do not meet the definition of person as prescribed in the Interpretations Act. So now they can't bring you to court. They have no jurisdiction, and they have to fix that issue before they can proceed. So I don't
Right.
even care what the merits of the case are. You don't have jurisdiction to hear this case based on the Interpretations Act. Case should
And
be
that
dismissed immediately.
and that is absolutely the key thing. I mean, if you
Yeah,
forget everything else, that is the key thing, isn't it?
right. So what we just did was we planted the biggest bomb in history. Thanks,
Yeah.
Richard.
No, thank you. You're the one that went to the Interpretation Act and said, there it is. Is that you? No. Then all of that doesn't
Yeah,
apply.
I don't care what their argument is. It doesn't matter because it doesn't apply to me. I'm not a person under your
Yes.
definition. I don't meet the definition. So now, do I care about the capitalized name? Do I care about the Cestic v. Trust? It was 1688. Do I care about the fact that the name is backwards or upside down? No, I don't meet the definition of person under the Interpretations Act. Therefore, I'm challenging subject matter jurisdiction, and it doesn't apply to me. And they have to deal with that. So I don't care what case it is. Doesn't
Right.
make any difference. Who cares?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you tell them that in advance, then the chances are they won't even bring you into court because they, if that's your immediate rebuttal is that's not me.
And you told them in advance. See, they claim that ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Yes.
So if I turn around and I go to somebody that's council tax and you're dealing with letters or something and you're writing to the council tax, you can write to them and say, this doesn't apply to me, right? And then you can get into the other arguments and throw them in there if you want. And if they turn around and come after you anyway, now you have the Public Bodies Act to hold them liable. You can actually go after them
Right.
because you should have seen what they're doing. And what they're doing, then they mail these fraudulent bulk orders out of here, which are, they got the court seal and yet it's issued by the local council and it violates the Local Government Act and all that crap. You got them on mail fraud because they mailed that crap to you. So that becomes mail. That's postal mail fraud. And they're
Yeah.
bringing you into court under false pretenses. So now you can hold them guys liable. And it says right in there that you can go into the court. So whenever anybody gets a court file, a normal court, I'm not talking this magistrate garbage, okay, you can file it. You can do one of three things. You can ignore it, in which case you're going to get a conviction against you. You can file a statement of defense, which means you want to appeal what they're doing. Or, and here's the key, write this down, you can file a statement of defense and counterclaim.
And counterclaim.
So now you're saying, okay, well, they're saying this, here's my defense to it, but I'm also filing a claim against them or applying something to me which doesn't apply. And so
yes.
what they'll typically try to do is they, oh crap, we're going to be in problems now. So they turn around, they dismiss the case. Well, if they dismiss their case, they're first in time, first in line, right? So their
Right.
case against you goes away. But then you tell the judge, but now we're going to hear my case because I'm now the plaintiff by counterclaim, and we're going to deal with that issue. Oh no, they threw out the baby with the bathwater to help them guys, but you're still standing there because now you're first in line. Their case just went downriver because they withdrew it. And if they say they're not doing that, well, then you're depriving me of due process of the law, Your Honor. And therefore, given that, under this Public Bodies Act, I can now come after you. Are you sure you want to be doing that? So now you're holding the court accountable to its own statute. So, like when I was doing this is the biggest one we can ever do for people because you're going to find all the statutes apply to a person. And this applies in Canada. We have an Interpretations Act too, as does, I imagine, Australia and the rest of the countries. And there's 200 and some of them. I'm not going to go check them all, but you guys now know to look for this Interpretations Act and start to see what it says and download it before they change it.
Because if they change it, it doesn't make any difference if you've got the earlier version of it.
That's right. Because that's what they do. As soon as they find, oh, somebody exposed the loophole. In an example for our case, we have a municipal act, right, for Ontario, and it said right in there, any corporation that violates the municipal act, it's a $10,000 penalty, and I put that in the paper, but I sent off to the city lawyer, right, who disregarded it. But anyway, they went into Parliament and got the darn thing changed because the who's the corporation? That's them.
Yes.
So I can hold them accountable for whatever it is, $10,000 or whatever the number was. But I happen to have the old copy, so I can say, well, this was applicable then. Why are you removing it from the law to protect yourself?
Yeah, it looks very fishy.
Yeah, well, the whole thing they do is fishy, as we know. Anyway,
Brilliant.
I think this will probably be the biggest show, probably the highest rating if people understand what we just did.
Yes, I mean that's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's whether people understand it and they have the confidence that understanding the interpretation that you've given us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there in black and white. They can go and look at it and think about it and ask their friends. Well, does this is persons incorporate or unincorporate? What does unincorporate mean then?
Well, when you deal with person in this case, because when you have a corporation, a company,
yes,
right? That's a fiction.
Yes.
Right? You create, I don't know, Richard Bob's LLC. That's a fiction. But not all companies have to be incorporated, right? You could have an LLC, which is a limited liability. You could have an S corp. You could have just a sole proprietorship, but they're all fictions.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that way they can be incorporated or unincorporated.
Yeah.
Right. And
because it doesn't. Sorry to interrupt. It does not say a person includes a man or woman, or
exactly.
an individual, or a human being even.
That's right, and it says it has to be a body corporate, right?
Yes.
So they're already telling you it has to be a fiction, it has to be a corporation.
Yeah.
And you are not a corporation. You may have the Cesta KV Trust, which was a trust created for you, but that doesn't make it you. If you're an employee of, I don't know, Tesco's, you're not Tesco, you're just an employee.
Yes.
Right? So you're not that corporation, and it's right there in black and white.
Fantastic.
How are they going to get out of it? Yeah.
Well, let's hope that the viewers understood all of that and can now write back to the council tax or whomever and say, well, this doesn't apply to me. Send me one that does apply to me, which of course they won't do because they can't really.
No, and the other thing we can tell them is they have to, when they give us a statement, it's just a statement.
Yes.
Tell them that you want a true bill that conforms to the Bills of Exchange Act, which means it has to carry their signature. That means somebody's liable. That's the one trick. See, when these guys say stuff back to you, council or even bailiffs or whatever, they never sign the bloody thing, so you don't know who to hold accountable.
Yes.
So tell them that you're required all their documents to contain a signature, a legible signature, and printed name, because you want to know who you're talking to.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise
it could be a scammer.
Could be anybody. Yeah. Now I'm dealing with a mortgage thing right now, and what they did in my case, this mortgage, because I went through this company, and They sent paperwork, I sent a rebuttal. What did they do? They sent it to the lawyer. I sent the lawyer 20 pages of stuff to prove that what they're doing is wrong. What do they do now? They turn around and forward it to a different lawyer because they want to know that. And this is what they do. And you deal with council tax, somebody there will go to a different department conveniently. So, well, I don't work here anymore, right? So we don't want that. We're going to deal with that person and that person only. And there's a legal maxim in law. Okay, when we went through maxims. We should do an update on that actually, because there's more maxims that basically say that if you're not party to the contract, right?
Yeah.
Then you have no business here. And I forget the exact term for it. But the thing is, darn phone. The thing is, under the legal maxim, if they're not party to the contract, how can they testify to anything? It's all hearsay evidence. And they're supposed to operate and give you something of consideration, right? So we'd have to cover that in a separate topic because we go well over the time
absolutely.
frame.
We're
but
over
you
the time.
can see where we can apply some of this stuff. That's the main thing.
Absolutely. Brilliant stuff. Stan, thank you so much. Again, pushing the boundaries and using their rules that they made up. We didn't make it up. They made it up. And we're just being honourable people and just applying the rules. And it turns out that a lot of these rules have got nothing to do with us anyway. So I don't know what we're worried about.
Exactly.
There we are, ladies and gentlemen. I will be back with more monologues and more wonderful interviews. The Stan McDonald moment will be coming back, I'm sure, to this channel very soon. But in the meantime, thank you, Stan, so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And until next time, from us, goodbye.